And we are back, as is my cold and my tissues. So we'll see how this goes. Today's book is The Family Remains by Jewell. Suffice to say, you guys should listen to me. After reading this book, I actually had to rewatch my review of The Family Upstairs because you don't necessarily need The Family Upstairs to read this one, but there are a lot of holes left if you don't know the origin story. After watching my review and hearing all of my issues / questions that I posed, I was like, either I'm just really good at what I do, or Jewell watched my review and said, I'm going to answer all of those questions because I called it. Everything that I had a problem with, she fixed in this novel, or not even that I had a problem with, but the things that had me dissatisfied, she addressed in this novel. I'm just saying, if you've ever watched Bones and you know that they say King of the Lab, Queen of the Books right here, I got it. And it made me feel pretty good because so often I feel like I'm on an island with my opinions. So let's get into Family Remains by Jewell. It picks up where the family upstairs left off. No, really? Oh gosh. Just like with our last book, this one has multiple perspectives. Largely Henry, Lucy, and this guy named Leo, as well as this woman named Rachel. The fact that Finn is no longer in Africa is the instigator for one of our first plots, and that is Henry, who, as we all know, or if you don't, you need to watch the review, was planning to go to Africa with Libby so that he could see Finn again because he is obsessed with Finn. So now that Finn's not in Africa, Henry's like, well, where did he go? The second is Rachel. In the first novel, Lucy's husband, Michael, was a bad dude and she had left him and then she had inadvertently killed him. In this novel, we meet Rachel, who married Michael after Lucy, and then we see what sort of relationship they had. The third, a police detective named Leo, who is investigating a bag of bones, essentially, that was found in the River Thames. It turns out to be Birdy, who, again, from the last novel, which is why I say you could read this novel on its own, but it really helps to read the first novel, which is why I went and I refreshed my memory, because I obviously remembered the high points, and Birdy was not one of the high points. In this novel, it essentially explores her. I don't exactly know why, except that then explores the topic of grooming and what had been done to Lucy in the first novel, which Lucy is Libby's mother. She had gotten pregnant by the cult leader when she was 14, and then she'd had Libby when she was 15. So I think this is why I enjoy Jewell so much, is it's such a tangled web. She does such a great job at bringing all these aspects together, and even, like I said, bringing the things from the first novel that I was like, and then making them relevant in this novel, kind of like, oh, Beth, you just needed to wait a little bit. Let's start with my disappointments, and then I'll hop into the meat of the matter. I was actually disappointed with the resolution regarding Finn. Just like in The Family Upstairs, I really enjoyed how we left off with Family Remains, and I'm hoping this means that we'll have more. Although if we don't, I'm fine, because just like with The Family Upstairs, it leaves a lot to my imagination as to what's going to happen. But I thought we could have used either Finn's perspective this whole time or no Finn at all. I thought it was kind of a throwaway what we did get from him, but I will elaborate on that later. What I enjoyed about this novel again was the exploration of Henry, and who was he? He's facing an identity crisis. In the first novel, he faced it because he was trying to make himself into Finn, and in this novel, he still doesn't know who he is. First one, he was an unreliable narrator. things could have looked one way, but then he would color them another way. And in this too, is he good or is he bad? And I really liked that because it wasn't necessarily a novel exploring his psyche, but because we went along his journey to find Finn, we got to understand how he works. Initially, I was just like, that's it? But then we got to the end and I said, Jewell, you made it all worth it. Thought it was interesting how Jewell kind of changed the narrative in this one. She changed her original canon because of what we learned with Finn in the end. It fed into my disappointment about the end until we got to the very end. Well, it made me dislike Finn as a character. It took away his mystique because I liked who she'd painted him to be until we got into his head. So I guess overall, I would have chosen to never have gotten Finn at all. Or, yeah, just never have gotten Finn at all and just seen everything through Henry's eyes. Lastly, I kind of wished, not kind of, I don't know why I say that. I wished that Lucy and Finn's romance had been rekindled. It's plainly stated in the first novel, they didn't actually have a romance, even though he fathered her child. But something in my head made it something bigger than it was, and I was hoping that they would get back together in this novel. Because when Henry goes to find Finn, Lucy's reaction makes it very obviously, sorry, my cold medicine mixed with my inability to have a complete straight thought. It's gonna be an interesting review. Her reaction to finding out that he's gone and that he is more than likely looking for Finn makes it seem like she has a relationship with Finn, that she knows things, that she knows what Henry is going to do if and when he finds Finn will be good for nobody. We get nothing, honestly. They don't have a relationship, and it's kind of convoluted in the end, and it almost makes you wonder what's real and what's not real. But let me not confuse you any longer. Let's jump into the whole Finn and Henry. Okay. Everything I said about not needing to read the first novel, I take back. I retract my statements. You absolutely have to read the first novel. Lucy had been destitute in this first novel. In this novel, she is now living with Henry, who cannot stand having her and her kids living with him because he is nice, neat, orderly, and quiet. And they are the exact opposite. Although it seems like she's not actually that bad, but for him, it grates on his nerves everything that they do. They are disrupting his peace, his solitude, letting him do whatever devious things he wants to do at his own time. We're getting a lot of how Henry is just annoyed with her. And then Finn is no longer at the game reserve in Africa. Henry is like, not okay with that. I need to find him. So he up and leaves in the middle of the night. We find out that he's gone to Chicago because he had trolled a forum about this game reserve that Finn works at, and he had started to communicate with this one woman, and somehow this woman, who is just a tourist, knew that he had gone to Chicago because there were family problems or something and he had to go to Chicago. Finn is like, okay, I'm going to Chicago. He tracks Finn down. Spoiler, he figures out where he is. I was trying to put myself in the shoes of all these people that he encountered. At what point would I be suspicious of this guy? I can't really say, because Finn had told people in his life about his upbringing and about this weird guy, gave these people the distinct impression that he wanted nothing to do with this guy who had locked him in his room and done these terrible things to him, which, again, read the first novel if you don't know what I'm talking about. And all signs are pointing to Henry. He first gets into town. He has no idea which way Finn swings, but he, for some reason, says, I'm gonna get a hotel room in the part of town where all the homosexuals will go to go to bars and to parties. And he starts asking around. He's like, hey, my name is Joshua, looking for my friend. He seems to have gone missing. He gets a phone call from this guy. The guy's like, hey, I actually live in Finn's apartment. I think this is the guy you're looking for. He gives some information, but at a certain point, Henry starts to creep him out. Henry leaves. He's still not satisfied, basically. He then tracks down this guy named Chris Doll, or Dole. I can't really tell because of the way the English accent does it, but I'm gonna say Chris Doll. Apparently, Chris had been in a relationship with Finn, which makes Henry very excited, because now, due to another relationship that he found out Finn had, he's like, oh, well, he's bi. He swings both ways. And I'm thinking, oh, well, I guess this means that Henry thinks he has a chance. So Chris runs a tour business on the back of this like massive motorcycle type. He takes Henry around town, and Henry's getting information from him. He then tracks Finn down to an Airbnb, and he's trying to figure out, how do I get in contact with him? I know, my Airbnb is really crappy, so I'll go downstairs and I'll leave a note on his door saying that, hey, I'm the dude from like this apartment, and I heard that your apartment's great and that you're gonna be leaving sooner rather than later. So can we chat? Like maybe I can take your apartment over when you go. No, I thought that was a bit of a stretch. If I'd gotten a note like that, I would have been like, how did this person learn any of this information? Anyways, Henry is slowly deteriorating. He is losing his ever-loving mind. He gets to the point where he's like, forget it, I'm just gonna approach Finn face to face. So he knocks on Finn's door, Finn opens it, and he forces his way inside, and that's all we get until a little while later. Let's move into Rachel, because Rachel was a perspective I wasn't sure if I needed or not. But then, by the end of the novel, I saw why Jewell used her. Because we meet Rachel, and she is at a clinic for the morning after pill. This is where she runs into Michael Rimmer, who is Lucy's ex-husband. And I'm just like, Michael Rimmer, why does that sound so familiar? Eventually, I put the pieces together. I don't know, because they are in the past. So everything else, the detective searching about Birdy, anything about Henry, anything with Lucy, that's all in our present, like 2019, 2020. For Rachel, we're in 2016. And of course, because I hadn't read The Family Upstairs for a year, I was kind of thrown off a little, but I did get there in the end. Michael charms her. After 3 months, they get married. I'm like, okay, I'm still trying to figure out what's going on here, because very early on, she is introduced to his red flags, and she chooses to ignore his red flags. Their honeymoon, she's like, I'm kind of over all this vanilla stuff we're doing. Insert Jack Harlow's Love It On You. Vanilla, baby. And she decides, hey, I'm going to introduce things to spice up our love life. And she recognizes immediately this is that point of no return where everything changes. He does not react well to it. And from then on, according to her perspective, he wants nothing to do with her. He will not touch her. They get back from their honeymoon, and she goes off to her own place for a week. She reaches out to him, and when she gets to his apartment, he acts like nothing happened. Side note, Rachel is a jewelry designer. She's a struggling jewelry designer who lives off daddy's money. She recognizes this probably isn't the best way to live her life, but it works for her, so that's what she's gonna do. It turns out that even though she marries Michael, she never gives up her apartment, which I thought was interesting, but it does come in handy later, so What you gonna do? He starts to gaslight her. She gets angry at him in this first meeting of, why are you completely ignoring what you put me through? Why are you completely ignoring what had happened to us? And he says, oh, that wasn't me, that was you. While she recognizes the fact that that is not true, she basically just accepts it and decides it's not worth arguing over, we'll just move forward. And then she continues to tell us all the ways that he kind of emotionally abuses her. That night, they try to be intimate. He can't do it. So he gets very angry, and then their intimacy turns very rough. And then he blames it on her. He's like, oh, isn't this what you wanted? That's not what I wanted. No. And that's essentially how their love life continues to go, in which he cannot perform and he gets angry with her. He just starts to mentally and emotionally abuse her so that she has no outlets. Like, she can't go anywhere after work. Once she's done at work, she has to come home. She has to answer his phone calls, all of these things. One day, she gets great news that this department store wants to pick up her jewelry line and sell it in their stores. She doesn't want to share it with Michael just yet because he has lost all of his wealth. It turns out that he works with drug dealers, and the equipment that he sells to drug dealers never made it. Now he has no money and blah, 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 blah. So he is having her pay for everything. So she's like, I don't want to let him know. And even though his phone call comes in, she's like, I'm not going to answer his phone call. I'm going to have fun with my girlfriend. So they go out, they have a great night. When she comes home, she falls asleep on the couch and she wakes up to him raping her. This is her last straw, and she leaves him and she goes back to her apartment. And I'm like, okay, this is like all within 3 months of being married. Girl, why would you go back to your apartment alone? Go to your dad's house. This dude is obviously dangerous. He doesn't do anything. But she does seek out the help of a lawyer on paper. Without her admitting what he did to her, on paper, it just looks like she doesn't want to uphold her vows for richer or for poorer. Because now that he's poor, she doesn't want to be with him for sickness or for health, for better or for worse. No, all these things. It just sounds like she jumped into this marriage too quickly, but she refuses to tell anybody about what he did, which on one hand, I'm totally behind. I understand she doesn't want to be judged because she often compares herself to Lucy. Lucy is his figment. And she's like, oh, Lucy must be so much better than me. She doesn't want people to also judge her on the fact that she jumped into a marriage that she should have done. It's all still psychological, but at the same time, we didn't invest enough time into that aspect. So it really felt superficial and surface level, because that's not what this novel was about. This novel, there are so many things going on that it wasn't about rape, and it wasn't about gaslighting, and it wasn't about women who don't feel safe. It was like, these things happened, and now we're going to go into another perspective, and then when we get back to her, she just doesn't want to talk about it. I got frustrated that she wouldn't just talk about what happened to her, because I thought that would have been really interesting given the time allotted to her storyline. Anyways, so she just keeps waiting for Michael to come after her, and he doesn't, which I was like, this is boring. Initially, it heightened the suspense because I kept waiting for him to appear, but then he never appeared. So what's the point of all of this? What she does in the interim is she tracks Lucy down. She doesn't reveal who she is to Lucy, but they have these moments in which they bond in solidarity over being in an abusive relationship. Because we're in Rachel's head, I'm like, what all is Lucy putting together? Like, does she actually know who Rachel is, or does she just think Rachel is a woman that she can bond with over this, even though it's never explicitly stated what they're bonding over. By what she sees about Lucy, she realizes that Lucy is not someone to be envied. Like, Lucy is a busker. She is poor. She can't take care of her kids. She lives in a hostel. But what she does eventually do is she's hanging out with her dad. And her dad, who I said is very wealthy, says, you know what? I think I'm going to sell the house. She is taken aback by this because he loves this house. But then she starts to put the pieces together that there are a lot of things that he used to spend a lot of money on that he doesn't spend money on anymore. She tries to get him to tell her what's going on because at first she thinks he has a terminal illness because he's also lost weight. He's like, I'm fine. I don't need this house anymore. So they're cleaning it out. She runs across some financial statements of his and she realizes that he only has like 12,000 pounds left to his name. He's given hundreds of thousands of pounds to this investment firm. She contacts his financial advisor, and his financial advisor's like, I haven't actually had anything to do with your dad in a long time. He does not even have most of his money in stocks. Like, he's not invested most of his money. He'd rather see where his money is. So basically, this 12,000 pounds, all that her dad has left. She tracks down this investment firm. It turns out to be something of a legitimate business, but his money is going into some kind of offshore account and she can't track who is in possession of that offshore account. And she's like, what in the world? Why is my dad giving all this money to this unknown entity? Her dad catches her on the phone with this investment firm and he's like, hang up. I will explain everything. You just need to hang up. So he tells her he's being blackmailed. And I'm like, okay, this is what Michael's up to, because she has since run into Michael again, and it seems like he's doing very well, and he is now dating a friend of hers that upon their initial coupling, like the night that they actually got engaged, they'd gone to a party, and she had seen him chatting with this girl, and she got all insecure, and he's like, don't worry about it. Apparently, she should have worried about it in some respect. He's a psychological manipulator. So maybe he wasn't actually attracted to this woman then, but he has a pattern. Anyways, he's with this woman now, which then makes Rachel mad because the woman then reveals, oh, hey, congratulations on your business. And Rachel's like, how did you find out? Because if you know, then he knows. And I'm here thinking because she decided not to pursue typical divorce. It was kind of like the 2-year separation period. If they go 2 years, then they can get it just annulled. I don't know. I'm thinking this 2-year period is going to come back to bite her. And now that he knows that she has money coming in, that this is why he's wealthy, that he somehow is tapped into her bank account, because even though everything that they had was separate, because they are still married, like somehow he has access to it, and because she's kind of bad with money, like she's not noticing. No, we enter the fact that he has been blackmailing her father because he had found risque videos of things that she had done in past relationships on her phone. He had taken these from her phone and he was now sending them to her dad. Okay, guys, this is why we shouldn't be doing certain things. And if we're doing those certain things, do not provide video evidence. Do not provide photographic evidence. Do that in the privacy of your own home. Do not leave a trail, because people will find these things and they will make you miserable. Disagree with me if you want, but they cannot make you miserable if there's no proof. On one respect, I'm like, Rachel, you caused all of this. But that's neither here nor there. Rachel then goes to find Michael. She is going to find evidence that he's the guy that is blackmailing her dad. So when they were dating, he was like, oh, here are all these properties that I own. And it turns out that all of that was basically fictional, but he has this one house that he did actually own. He is currently living in it. It is the house where he died, where in the first book, Lucy had gone to meet him and she ends up killing him. So she goes here and his maid is like, oh my God, gosh, I've heard all about you. I'm so glad to meet you. And she's like, okay. The housekeeper's like, oh, he's having his siesta. She's got about 15 minutes on her own. She goes into his office, finds all of these documents. She finds this gun, and she basically gets everything she needs. She then kind of spoils her own plan. She had all these things that she was going to do to get him to reveal information, but basically she's like, I know what you did, and I'm going to make you stop. When she comes back the next day or something, this is when she sees Lucy cleaning up what she had done. Rachel gets into this house after Lucy leaves. She sees Michael, blah, 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 and she keeps Lucy's secret because she hadn't necessarily gone there to kill him, but she had gone there willing to kill him if need be over the course of their conversation or whatever happens. Now she spends all this interim time because in that time when Michael had been silent, radio silence, I thought, okay, maybe he died. Maybe this is when he had died. Like, this is how close their timelines are. No, he obviously dies later. Rachel kind of keeps tabs on Lucy. She is kept abreast of his murder and how the police, they won't let it go. Eventually, she gets the phone call. She then goes to Lucy and she's like, hey, this is who I am. I know what you did. I've been protecting you this entire time, and I just want to let you know that everything's over and done. They've pinned his murder on his dirty dealings with these drug dealers. We are in the clear, nothing to worry about. She does end up getting all of her money back, and I'm like, well, at least she got that. But this is something that I had complained about in my last review about the family upstairs because I felt like Lucy got away with murder. There was nothing, no follow-up regarding what she had done. And so this, it's actually resolved in two ways. One, now we know why. Two, when Henry goes off to find Finn, Lucy is like, I gotta go after him. I've got to stop him. But she still has all of these fears. She and her children still have illegal passports. And now we know why she was so afraid. It's because she's still afraid that somebody is going to come and pin his murder on her. So I was like, thank you, Lisa Jewell, for answering my question, for expanding on this unanswered space about why nobody ever came after Lucy, because she has all of this guilt over killing him and it's never explored. So thank you, Lisa Jewell, for showing us why nobody suspected Lucy, and then for also revealing why Lucy is acting so funny about going through customs and like going in another country and about police, and like because she's still paranoid about being discovered, like her guilt. I feel like I need to apologize if none of this is making sense. I'm trying to get through it with a cold and on cold medication, and oh gosh, we'll all be lucky if I can do this sensically. Now we're gonna jump into Leo looking into Birdy, because again, this was something that I questioned the need for. We open the book with Leo because he is called to this discovery of these bones. We know that these bones have been in the river for a short period of time, but the bones, this person who belonged to these bones, has actually been dead for decades. Convoluted, I'm not going to go there because my brain is too foggy to really sort through these. So I was actually thinking, because we had met Rachel, so I'm thinking, oh my gosh, this is actually Rachel. But then I was like, it can't be Rachel because the timelines don't line up. Rachel has only been engaging with Michael 3 or 4 years prior to when these bones are discovered. So if the bones are like 20 years old, there's no way that they could be Rachel, which I admit was something of a letdown because I thought that this was Michael doing something devious. And it wasn't. It was about Birdy. Who in the heck is Birdy? Birdy is the woman in the first novel who had been part of a band. They'd recently had some fame, and then she comes to live in the cult house. She starts a relationship with the cult leader David. She grooms Lucy to be David's new lover, essentially. I didn't do the best job in my Family Upstairs review of painting a picture of Birdy. So I could not remember like all these aspersions that are being cast on her in The Family Remains, how accurate they were as to the person that we had known in the first novel. But in this novel, first it's like, oh, she's a sister, she is a daughter, she was a great person. We are devastated at not knowing where she is. Leo, he's talking to all these people. He is very unfamiliar with the Family Upstairs plot. I guess it wasn't big enough news for him to know about it. The initial occurrence, because he came over, I believe, from Ghana. So when he emigrated to the UK, he was a child. So like none of this really made much sense to him because it wasn't part of his reality. And I guess whatever had happened in the previous year regarding the discovery of Libby getting the house, it wasn't major news. I'd forgotten that so Libby, Henry, and Lucy, we knew all the answers as the reader, but they did not divulge all these secrets to the general public. So it's not something people knew. They did not know the ins and the outs of who died and why they died and who was who. So this basically puts him back on the path to discovering the truth about the cult in this house, which he does. He keeps coming back to Libby because Lucy had left to go to Chicago to find Finn. She had left her dog with Libby, and he's like, okay, so Libby inherits this multi-million-dollar house. So she gets 7 million euros from the sale of this house. Yet she is living in this random flat with a roommate. He's like, this doesn't make sense to me. But when he goes to talk to her, she says, oh yeah, this is my mom's dog. And we all are like, oh, that makes complete sense. But for him, he's like thinking about her adoptive mother. And she's just a terrible liar. So eventually he figures things out and he gets her to tell him the truth about stuff. He just wants to know who killed Birdy. This is when he tracks Justin down. And I was just like, oh my gosh, Beth, like, you know, you should never doubt yourself as either a writer or as a book reviewer, because you kind of know when things aren't right. Because Justin, I was so confused about him in the first novel. What Lisa Jewell does is she reveals that Justin had left the house knowing that something hinky was going on. He felt really guilty about leaving that house. This guilt led him to make poor decisions. He ended up going to jail for a while, and then when he gets out, he had all these substance abuse problems. He kind of, not another cult, but joins this community that lives off the land and is off the grid. He's finally tracked down. He is shocked to hear about all the things that had happened at the house and with the family. Then he ends up committing suicide, and he leaves this suicide note. He takes blame for Birdy's murder, when in actuality, Henry did murder Birdy. And that's when I was like, what have I forgotten? I don't remember how Birdy died, but I was like, I don't think Justin was there for it. All of this then feeds into Henry, because the last thing we'd seen was him assaulting Finn. We see his reemergence. Lucy, with the help of her son, has tracked Henry down. They have tracked down Chris. This is when I don't really like back and forth storylines. This is when I like things to be linear, because the things that they're finding out are intersecting with Chris and Henry's interactions, but then we don't see Lucy's side of things until after we've seen Henry's side of things, and it just makes things more convoluted. I didn't enjoy this part, but Henry then meets up with Chris. And Chris has been in touch with Lucy, and this is all just a trap in order to capture Henry. I don't know how I missed this, but last I knew, Henry was fleeing out the back door of this restaurant, but then the next thing I know, he is in an interrogation room. Oh, I never had anything to do with Finn. I've never found him. And I was like, wait a minute. Did he kill Finn? And then I was like devastated that Finn died and we got no perspective from him. We got no answers from him. No, this is the biggest spoiler. This is the end. Everything has been resolved. Birdy's murder, everything with Michael Rimmer is done and gone. And now the family is back because Birdy had, in the beginnings of the book, Birdy had been in the process of buying this house. And the whole thing with the money and Libby is that she had split it amongst three. So she, Henry, and Lucy all got profits from this house. Lucy essentially is using everything she got for this broken down house. They finally are moving in and the entire family is coming together and they're celebrating. And then Finn arrives. Whoa. Okay, and now we're in Finn's perspective. Finn reveals basically all of the things that he had said that made us think they were about Henry were actually more about David, I'm assuming. He, like Justin, was absolving Henry of all of his sins and his misdeeds. Henry at this point has come to terms with himself. I don't need to be Finn. Finn is not the person that I've been idolizing this entire time. Finn embraced who he is. I need to embrace myself. Now, Finn is arriving and he's like, I was scared to meet my kid. And Henry had been like, dude, there's no need to be scared to meet her. She doesn't need you. She's a grown woman. She has her family. She has her parents. You don't need to do anything for her. Just meet her. He arrives and he's late. And I'm like, I'm so sorry I'm late. And we learn that when Finn had forced himself inside of Finn's apartment, Henry had been blitzed. Finn is like, look, Henry, all these things, like Henry believed that he was the one killing Finn with his love potion. And Finn was like, you were not murdering me. I was dying from malnutrition. Oh, but I locked you in your room and blah, blah, blah. And he's like, none of this is on you. You thought I had everything together, but you were the one that had everything. I had nothing. I had no clue who I was. I had no clue what I was doing. My whole life has been about figuring out who I am, what I want to be, what I want to do. And I was like, this is kind of boring. I liked the mystique of Finn. I liked this idea that Finn had all the answers, that Finn was the answer, that Henry's perspective on his relationship with Finn is exactly the same as Finn's perspective on their relationship, and that Finn was scared to death of Henry, when in fact, he had no problems with Henry. It was very disappointing. However, we jump back into Henry. Henry has since become dissatisfied with being Henry again. Now, he has decided he's going to be Chris Doll. He is going to buy the same motorcycle as Chris, and he's going to inhabit that personality. And I am just like, thank you, Lisa Jewell. Because this whole happily ever after, Henry has come to terms and he loves himself again kind of stuff was just not satisfying. The fact that we see that Henry is still messed up in the head and that he still is trying to become other people, it kind of gives me hope for humanity. I was so happy to learn that Finn got it wrong. Henry was crazy this entire time. From book 1 to book 2, Henry was nuts. All these people trying to absolve him of his sins simply had no idea as to what kind of person Henry was. Because what kind of pushed Henry over the edge of like acceptance was when Justin took the fall for Birdy's murder. Because in his letter, he basically was like, Henry was the only person in that house worth saving. I wanted to save him. That poor child had no clue like what to do and what was going on and how to save himself. Henry's like, I'm redeemable. Yeah, no. Henry's masochist, and I thought it was awesome. I really enjoyed this novel. If it hadn't been for the very, very end when Henry was trying to be Chris, I would have had different opinions on the book. Some people commented that this novel started slow, and I don't think it was that slow. I thought it got slow in the middle towards the end, because when Henry finds Finn, it's like a door slammed in our face, and I was like, that was the exciting part of the novel, watching Henry's unraveling, and then now he finally finds Finn, which that was something of a complaint of mine, which I touched on earlier. I could not believe how quickly he found Finn. I expected him to have a lot of trouble to find Finn, and no, it took him like a couple days. Considering that Finn was running from something, I thought it would be much harder for him to be found, but it wasn't. Anyways, thank you for putting up with me. I hope this all made sense, and I will see you later. Bye.